So you own a duplex in Atlanta. Talk about
Yeah.
that. Talk about how that generates income for you.
Ooh, the duplex is the ultimate life hack. I think I heard Giovanni's talk on one of your previous episodes about purchasing a duplex. When I first moved here to Atlanta, I just tried to expose myself to as many people in real estate as possible. And I came across this influencer in real estate. I mean, I don't know if he's the most liked anymore, but he had a book that he published called Lord of My Land. And in his book, he talked about owning a duplex and living on one side and renting the other side out. And that concept just stuck with me. It was like, I mean, he just made it so simple. It just seemed like it was so simple and so obtainable. So I had set my intentions on doing that. This was probably during the pandemic to purchase a property here in Atlanta. And obviously, that was probably the most ideal time with where the interest rates were. I think we got like one of the lowest interest rates at that time. Um, and my mortgage payment I mean, it was minimal. So right away, we inherited a tenant when we first moved into our place. And we didn't have it that they were paying the entire mortgage, but they were paying such a substantial amount of it that our living expenses were like basically zero. Now it's been, I think, 3 years that we've been renting out our duplex and living in it, and we don't pay anything. The mortgage is paid by the other tenant. So we live for free, in my opinion.
That's a big deal as well. Way to generate some wealth and some passive income and live for free, like you said. So when you inherited these tenants, did you increase their rent at any point?
So we've had 3 tenants in 3 years.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. The first tenant that we inherited, it was not a pleasant transition. And that was something I feel like I hadn't read about in my research. All the podcasts that I've listened to that talked about owning a duplex and getting a duplex that maybe already had tenants in place. That was one of the things they just didn't warn you about, is when you are coming in as a new landlord, first of all, or new to this tenant, that relationship, as far as making that introduction with them and letting them know that, essentially they're going to have to kind of just, comply with whatever new rules that you put in place for your lease and all of these things. It's not always a smooth transition, and it wasn't with this particular tenant. He was unpleasant. It made the tenant-landlord relationship unpleasant, but thankfully his lease was actually coming up on expiration. So I gave him an option. I did tell him what our plans were to improve the property, but also increase the rents. And it didn't work for him, and that was okay. So mutually, we just agreed that he would move out when his lease expired.
Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah.
y'all, I say like 3 tenants in 3 years is a lot, because I had shared another episode that I also own property in Michigan, the hometown, right? Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I've been a landlord as well for just about 4 years. So the first 3 years, it was the same tenants for 3 years. And that was wonderful for me. That was lovely for me. I knew exactly what to expect with them. They paid their rent on time. I'm like, life is good. But then when it was time for them to move out and I was considering who would move in next, I'm like, I want somebody who is going to be here for another 3 years. I don't want to go through the process of turning a house multiple times, right? So when I say turning a house, I'm thinking about cleaning the house, getting it painted, because sometimes you have to paint depending on what the previous tenants did before. So just making it look and feel fresh, new, and clean for the next people coming in. Right. So I'm like, I don't want to have to do this every year. The longer it takes to get a tenant in your house, that's obviously money that you're not making. So if you're like, I'm renting out a property for X number of dollars, that's lost income. So, I mean, hopefully you're in a position where you're not counting on that money to live. But if you are, like, you don't want your house to be vacant for 3 months, 6 months during a flip. So for the other people listening in who are thinking about being a landlord, in my opinion, long-term tenants who are good tenants who are going to pay their rent on time is better than, getting a new tenant every year. So thank you for being transparent with us and sharing that the first, tenant wasn't all that great, but yeah, you figuring it out. That's part of being a
And that's
landlord, figuring
it.
it out.
I think to your point too, when you talk about vacancies and also, the costs that you incur as a landlord, right? Turning over a property or having it sit and not having a tenant in place. That is one issue I have never had. Okay. Housing obviously is an issue, right? And there's such a shortage of housing, that particularly where we're located, we're in town Atlanta. So probably 10 minutes to the airport, 10 minutes to downtown Atlanta. So it's just, it's a convenient location. I have never had issues renting our place out or finding qualified tenants for our place. I've also never had an issue of non-payment from a tenant. It's been more of a personality mismatch than anything, having, to remove tenants from our place. But vacancies have never been an issue, and we're always able to cover our mortgages. We've never really had to pay our mortgage because we've always had a tenant in place. Our tenant that we have currently actually is just signing their third lease. So, prayerfully, prayerfully, we continue to keep and have, like you said, long-term tenants, because you don't want to deal with the constant turnover of having to, prep and get that property ready for a new tenant.